Hello and welcome back to Resolutionary Leaders. I'm your host, Helena Gatto, and today we have a fabulous CEO, Sabrina Walker Hernandez, whose company is Supporting World Hope. She is for profit and she's in the space of really supporting particularly CEOs and board of directors navigate their way through business. And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited about this conversation.
So let's dive right in. Sabrina, we were just pre-talking and she was starting to tell me a whole bunch. And I was like, stop, we're going to start recording before you keep going on with all this these nuggets. So let's talk about these board of directors that you work with.
Yeah, so on the nonprofit side of the house, the board of directors that I work with, what happens is in working with the CEOs and working with the nonprofit boards, there's two things that's happening simultaneously. One is, and this is based on asking the questions and doing this for years. One is the CEOs don't want to seem bossy. This is their words, not mine. They don't want to seem bossy and they don't want to ruin relationships. Whereas the nonprofit board member has said yes. They said yes to giving up their time. They said yes to not, being paid or being a shareholder as in the business side of the house. They said yes to attending the meetings. They have said yes. And so they're very excited about the opportunity because they have said yes. And so when they say yes, they walk into the room with some assumptions. And those assumptions are that as a not-for-profit organization, that they are there, one, oftentimes, is to tell the director what to do, right? Two is they walk in with the same assumptions that a lot of people have about nonprofits. Nonprofits can't make a profit. I've heard that so many times. That's not the case. A nonprofit is just a tax designation, it's not a business model. And so you can make a profit. It's just, what do you do with that profit? Instead of paying shareholders dividends, what you do with that profit is you reinvest that in the program so you can expand the program. So you can make a profit. You can also charge for services as a nonprofit. Just because you're a nonprofit does not mean that your services are free. But I digress. A lot of board members make these assumptions, and so they walk into this boardroom, and what CEOs do on the other side of the house is they don't provide a clear orientation for them or set the expectations and standards for what it means to serve on this board, right? Mm-hmm. Because maybe they've served on a board before, but as I tell people all the time, there's great books, but there's no rule books. It's a collective of best practices. So they're going to come in with that generalization about the industry as one, and perhaps they've served on another board before, and they're going to bring that with them. Your job as the CEO is to orientate them to your organization because they said yes because they want to help. And if you don't give them those clear expectations, what they're going to do is create their own expectation. And what that often looks like, again, is micromanaging. That might look like letting that fear of fundraising take over. And so they don't want to fundraise. They're instead telling you what to do. When I work with CEOs, they don't like to hear that. They will do a lot of board bashing, and I'll say, okay, so what have you done? What training has been provided to them? Has there been an orientation? Is there continuing ongoing training around fundraising? When you recruited them, did you talk about fundraising? Or were you one of the people who said, oh, I don't want to talk about fundraising because then that's going to scare them away? So that's the accountability piece that I throw in there.
And so that's the nonprofit world.
That's the nonprofit world.
And so how is that different
on the for-profit? So on the for-profit side of the house, the governance, all that, it's the same. However, What happens is a for-profit board member, depending on if you're an advisory board member or you are actually a stakeholder, again, you are still trusting that the CEO is knowledgeable, right? It goes back to that confidence of that CEO. And even if you're serving on a for-profit board, you still need to be orientated on what has happened with this business in the past. And you're still providing guidance and advice to the CEO, but you're there, both worlds. You're there to ensure that the client, the customer, has some of the best products or best services. But on the for-profit side of the house, you're there really, it's about the bottom line, right? It is about generating the revenue for the stakeholders. Same thing on the nonprofit side. It should be about the bottom line, generating the revenue for your clients, which is that community member. So I think oftentimes we disassociate that. And I tell people all the time, if you walk into a nonprofit boardroom, don't check your business hat at the door. It is the same concept. We're holding the CEO accountable, but we're there to ask questions. We're not there to rubber stamp. We're there to ask questions. You read the information that is given to you so that you can make decisions and provide the guidance that is required. It's not about that micromanaging process.
And so for those of you that are wondering why we're talking about boards on my dispute resolutionary leaders podcast, there is a lot of conflict. There are so many stories and situations where boards have just imploded. And so I think what I'm hearing is a lot of the time they're not set up to succeed. And it's on the CEO to create that. I think what you said about letting them know the history, I think that's really a valuable nugget there. So how did you get into this space? How was this became your niche?
I've gotten into this space because I serve on, first of all, I served as in the capacity of a CEO for 20 years. And so I had to manage a board. And in managing that board, not only manage that board, but also grow that board. When I inherit the organization, we had 12 board members, and our goal was to grow to 21 board members. And so going through that growth process.
Sorry. What was the industry that you were in?
As a CEO, I've been in a couple of industries. I guess a little bit about me, I've been in the military, I've been in the nonprofit industry, I've been in the for-profit industry, but I really cut my teeth around this in the nonprofit industry. And then I moved to the for-profit industry. In the for-profit industry, I've served on several advisory boards, as well as some corporate boards. And as I'm sitting there, I often think of some of the similarities between the two. And really on the CEO end, it really is about that emotional intelligence. And are you building relationships with your board members? It's almost like you have to build the relationship. You have to establish the brand of being trustworthy. And trust is like one of those things that we don't think about and we don't notice until it's not there.
It's true. It's true. It's true. It's difficult to build it back once it's lost.
Once it's lost, difficult, and you have to be in full control of the process of building that trust. And sometimes you're going to have some challenging people on your board that you can't work with. And I always tell people, look, your whole goal is to build board champions. And that doesn't have to be, again, I had 21 boards. I serve on a board right now that has 27 people. I serve on another business advisory board. It's a small group. It's probably like 12 of us. But we look for us, and I can speak from the seat that I sit in, we see the CEO as the expert in the day-to-day of what's happening, right? And so you are there to share that information with us. And then in turn, what we do is give you our feedback, our advice, We're there to question. We're there to look at like the numbers and ask these questions because we're accountable to the stakeholders. And as you're going through that process, I've seen CEOs react one or two ways, right? Again, trust, building relationships. You have to build the relationships with individual board members because my point is oftentimes, if you take the time to build relationships with the individual board member, they will become your board champion. And what they will do is they will carry the message forward for you because oftentimes you want to hear that peer to peer. You want it to be a peer to peer thing. And so I always say, look, call your board champions, ask them for advice before the board meeting. You do that in the background. That is how you move things forward. I've been involved in politics a little bit too. And I got to work with a mayor and a city council. And behind the closed doors is when you hash that stuff out and you make the phone calls and you do this and you make sure everybody's, what's your issue? What's your concern? What's this? What's that? But then when you go out to the public or out to the front, the decision has already been made because you've done all of that in the background. And I think a lot of times CEOs look for permission to start doing those moves.
I'm still stuck on 27 people on one of these boards. That's
Yes.
like a lot of people.
A lot of people, a lot of personalities to manage. It works very well. It's one of the best boards I've ever served on because the expectation was clearly laid out during the recruitment process. And people pull their weight. They understand why they were asked to join that board and they lean into their strength.
Who was the person that set the expectations? And
in this particular board, the CEO was a part of the, vetting process, but the interview itself was done by the CEO and some select other board members. So they vetted the process, they interviewed, they went through all of that, and then the names were presented to the board. And they were very clear on the why they were asking to join the board, why they were asking myself in particular to join the board, and what they expected from me. And it was one of the best processes that I have went through. And then it wasn't just, again, okay, now you're here. There was a full onboarding process. And so it was very much appreciated because if you're looking for a high level, high skilled people to serve on your board, then particularly type A personalities, we're busy people and we live and die by the calendar. So if you can't tell me why you want me, when we meet, how much time this is going to cost me, then I don't want to be a part of it because I don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to work with, I don't want to say startup because that's not the term, but I don't have the bandwidth or capacity to work with CEOs who lack the confidence and the professional structure that is needed.
So you predominantly work with CEOs and coach them around how working with their boards.
Yes, coach them around working with their boards. And not just, I predominantly work with CEOs and coach them around working with their boards, but I also work with actual boards of directors as well. Because again, a lot of times is people bring in their assumptions about what it means to serve on a board, and there's no ongoing redirecting. And so when there's no ongoing redirecting, you can have that conflict that happens and people will overstep bounds and they will go into areas that really, that's not one of your roles or your responsibility.
So let's talk about a tangible situation. Let's say a board that you've been involved with that had conflict and then were able to successfully work through it. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I've served on and managed several boards. So I guess One of the most striking things for me, and it actually is a time that I would say was a failure for me, and I learned the most from it. So I was very frustrated with a board member, and I remember going to lunch with one of my board champions, and I remember just dumping. And it was in a public place, right? And I was dumping, I immediately, and the person's secretary was behind me, and I had no idea.
Oh no.
Yes. So that next board meeting was not very pretty. And so we had to navigate through that. And that person decided to resign from the board. And fast forward, at the time, let me say this, at the time, the reason for the frustration was a difference in we had taken on a project that was not sustainable. And they just couldn't, they didn't see it. And I was hitting my head and I was getting frustrated. And so I was venting with my board champion.
Mm.
And their secretary went back and told them. So I own that. And in that process, I had, sometimes you have to apologize. And so I had to be accountable to that. I had to apologize. I had to navigate that situation. And fast forward, they resigned, but fast forward maybe 10 years later, that person's husband, I actually became a board member on that person's husband was hired as an executive director of our economic development corporation, and I was a board member for the economic development corporation. And so we had to have that conversation. And again, I apologize, because even if in my frustrated state what I was saying was true, it wasn't nice. And so I did have to apologize. So that's one example. And I always say I will share my example. I will fall on that sword because I don't want to put anybody else's information out there. And I like to tell those stories. So that would be one example. Recently, I work with another board, the board that has 27 people, and it's just a couple people. Some people are just going to rub you the wrong way. There's one of the staff, they just rub me the wrong way. I don't know what it is about that person. I just don't, you don't jive. So when you don't jive, I'm a board member, they don't jive with the other board member, they share that with their champion, and I intercede, and I'm the intermediary between the two of them. So that's the way I've learned to navigate those situations.
By using the champion?
Yes, using the champion is going to be key. You have to have someone that you can, that will be your confidant, that serves on the board, that is a peer to the other board members. And I was very intentional in building those really personal relationships with my champions, with my board champions, beyond the business framework.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of my board champions, I had several over the years, but one of my board champions, we would go to lunch quite often. Of course, like I said, I vented to them. I got to the point where I learned my lesson, and we didn't vent in public. But you send that email, and I would write it exactly the way that I would want to say it. And instead of sending it to the person I wanted to send it to, I would send it to her. She was a woman in a electric industry, and that's very male dominated. She learned to navigate a lot of different rooms. And so instead of sending it to the person that I wanted to send it to, I would send it to her. And she would say, "Now, is that off your chest?
Yeah.
Are you okay? You can't send that email." And if I had meetings, sometimes that were challenging meetings, and I did not want to go in those meetings alone, I felt comfortable saying, "Can you attend this meeting with me?" But I would not do that with someone who is not my board champion, because you always want to project that confidence. But when you do have a board champion, you can be a little bit more vulnerable in those situations.
It sounds like that role of being a board champion, it's like the glue within, and that it's important to have somebody that's able to go about, I know, just thinking about I work in companies and working with a group of different people, and it takes time, but building the trust around, you can tell me everything and I will only share the things that will be productive. You can trust that I'm not going to share anything that's going to land badly on you or not be in your favor. And I think that you need to have that person that everybody's saying all of that stuff to, and they're able to hold the pieces that the other person does not need to know.
And this person's a very special person, because they also have the confidence of the board. They're peers of the board members, and the other board members respect them. So you can't just make everybody your champion, right? They have to be a person of integrity, and they have to be ethical. And so you really can't, out of a board of 21 or 27, you have to be strategic in who you identify as your champion, because it can backfire on you. Now, I've never had that situation, but people are people and people will people, right? That's what they will do. So you have to be very strategic about who becomes your board champion, what characteristics, what character do they bring to the table, and build that relationship. And I will say this, that was one. And then as Ella passed away from breast cancer, and I was totally devastated around that because she really was my champion. And so I had to go through the process and develop more relationships with certain board members. And I'm not on that board anymore. I'm not in that CEO seat anymore at that organization, but I still am very much engaged with my other two board champions. This time I said I'm gonna have two board champions. And we still connect regularly on a regular basis. We have a standing lunch engagement, and we're involved in each other's lives. And that's beyond the boardroom. And they're no longer with the organization. I'm no longer with the organization. And so we've developed a real friendship. And I'm just saying, this is what worked for me. And again, it's 27, 21, between 21 and 27 people. This is not the relationship that you build with all of them, not the champion relationship, but you do have to be strategic in building a relationship with someone who has the characteristics that you're looking for in a champion, because one day you will need them.
And this, you've written a book about this, am I correct?
Yes, I've written a book. I was a part of a book with Jack Canfield, Successonomics, and I go over the framework of building relationships. And B is for brand, and brand is really your personal brand. What energy are you bringing to the table when you come in the table? Who are you surrounding yourself with? When people see you coming, what do they see coming? Do they see someone who's a hard worker? Do they see someone, oh, that she's sharp, she's going to be prepared? Whatever that is, what is your brand? And then the U is unleash, right? That is about really leaning into the people in the boardroom that are with you. How are you unleashing their potential? Look, some of your board members are going to be number people, and so they want to see the data. Some of them are going to be they're more in the storytelling mode, right? Everybody speaks a different language, data, storytelling, show me the numbers. And you have to know who speaks what language and speak it to them. And so it's about unleashing that within them and you understanding that. And then the I is inspire. Look, for me, what I have seen is a good CEO is really a cheerleader to the board. Now, you can spend so much time in board meetings, but I will tell you the quickest way to get me to not be in a board meeting is to have the CEO doing all the talking, and there's no active participation from individual board members. I did not come to this meeting to hear you speak. I am here as an active contributor. And I always say, inspire your board members, almost like a cheerleader effect. And then with the L, it's a leverage. Are you leveraging their connections? Are you leveraging the knowledge that they bring to the room? Are you leveraging their relationships, their knowledge? Are you leveraging that? Are you leveraging the relationship that you have established with them? And then the D is really discover their story. I love discovering individual board members' stories. When it's a board of 27 and 21 and 50, I've seen some with 50s. You can walk into the room and literally know no one, especially if you're meeting quarterly. Even if you're meeting monthly, some people, with the advent of Zoom and all that, some people you only see them, you don't even see them. They're in the meeting, it's virtual, their camera is off. So it's about how do you discover who they are and their stories and what they can bring to the table. And so that model is what I wrote about in the book Successonomics.
Interesting. I want to read it. Bill.
Hopefully it's not too much, but that's someone sat me down and said, you really need to think about what has made you successful in working with boards and organizations over the years. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that, if I had to boil it down to what it is, building relationships. Mm-hmm. And not just relationships with stakeholders, but with board members. It really makes a difference. And I was sharing with you, someone said relationships is the new currency. And we were like, no, it's always been the currency. It's always been. And so it's really leaning into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think relationships is what gives you access.
Yes.
And if we want more representation at the higher levels, it's those relationships.
Yep. It's relationships and people who are willing to extend and leverage their relationships with you when you're in those rooms. Like, I got to meet the CEO of Time magazine because of relationships. I'm going to be on a private Zoom with the CEO from Forbes because of relationships. And so relationships give you access.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't take the access that your board members can bring to the table. And you want to be that CEO that they would bring in the room with them and mm-hmm. extend their credibility for you. Because when they're serving on your board, they're actually extending their credibility mm-hmm. to you. So leverage that and be worthy of that.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy woman. So thank you. And I will be reading your book and reading about your build framework.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, your patience and your grace and allowing me to be on your podcast. I really do appreciate it. Anywhere that I can get to spread this message is a blessing. And again, you have extended your platform to me, so I am grateful for that.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.